Hi, welcome to Priority Investor Conversations. I'm your host, David Garner, and this is the show where we talk about everything passive investing in real estate. We talk about note investing, private lending, syndications, rental properties, and almost everything else you can think of. And we have some amazing guests with some great experience and stories to share. So enjoy the show. Hi, I'm David Garner. This is the Priority Investor Calls podcast, and this is a very special podcast because it's the first in our series that we're going to call Note Investing Mastery. And I am absolutely delighted that today's guest is a very, very experienced note investor, done a lot of business, been in real estate for a long time, former athlete, military officer, and now note investor with a growing business, manages a couple of funds, does a lot of business. Jamie Bateman from Labrador Lending. And today we're going to talk about the thing that isn't talked about enough in note investing. There's a ton of technical information out there on how to invest in notes and why to invest in notes, all that kind of stuff. And that's great. But today, Jamie and I are going to talk about the mindset and the personality traits that are important to be successful in the note investing world. I'm delighted to have this conversation. I think it's something that isn't talked about enough. Not everybody should be in this space, but there are personality traits also that you can develop and get better at to become a more successful note investor. And we're going to cover all of that today, talk about some of the experiences that we've both had and what we feel, especially what Jamie feels, is most important as a personality, as the kind of profile of personality traits that make for a successful note investor. As I said, Jamie's a successful note investor in his own right with LabradorLending.com, manages a couple of funds, and also mentors new note investors as well. So this is, I think, going to be an incredible conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for joining us. How's it going?
It's going well, David. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I am stoked that you. Oh, that sounded like an Australian now, don't I? I'm stoked. I'm stoked that you've got found the time to come on and speak to us. I've been looking forward to this since we originally spoke. We spoke, I think, on email a while back, right? When we tried to get something set up.
Yeah, it was probably 6 months ago, something like that, a little back and forth. I think it may have started on LinkedIn, then email, and just with the craziness and I know you travel a good bit, and the craziness going on in the world today, we weren't able to link up at that point, but I am excited for this conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Absolutely. Same. So you are a note investor. I found you, I came across you, I think it was Chris, your partner on your podcast, the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast, first. And I've listened to a bunch of your stuff. I actually listened to your episode with Shantae Duffy the other day.
Yeah.
And I need to give her a call because I got like 90 notes out at the moment that I'm servicing myself.
Let's chat.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because she sounds like a pocket rocket, which is exactly. I buy into people now. The mistakes that I've made, like we were talking about before we went live, have taught me now I don't buy products, I buy people. And she sounds like the kind of person to do business. I know you guys have done business with her.
Yes. We have. We've invested in her company, and we have a stake in the success there for sure. But Chris and I also personally have numerous loans boarded there. So at BiFi Loan Servicing, but absolutely, Shantae's a rock star. Yeah,
that's it. It's the same as in my business. Like I'm the only guy in my business. So I've got a lady called Christina on the ground buying houses for me, overseeing renovations. She's 5'0" and fierce. My wife, she's also 5'0" and fierce. And I have Danny, who's also
like my wife too.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like for me, I definitely buy into people. But I wanted to talk today. We're talking note investing, right? Because you're a note investor, sure. and it's probably a good starting point for people that don't know you to give a little bit of a genesis of you, what it is you do, how you got into it, and what it is you do now.
Absolutely. So I've been in real estate investing longer than I've been doing note investing. You know, I guess it's a matter of how far we want to go back. I was heavily involved in athletics in college, got out of school and realized, okay, now what? You know, look at just like a lot of, I think honestly, right. A lot of student athletes do. It's hard to think beyond that. And did some coaching, did some different things. You know, and my father had been a realtor for forever, for as long as I could remember. So real estate was kind of always there. It was always a thing. Eventually got a quote unquote real job as a settlement officer at a title company, and realized quickly that I had no idea what a title company was and what title insurance was, what any of that was. They typically don't teach these things in school, unfortunately. Nope. And it's very important. So did the title thing for a couple of years, did a lot of refis in the kind of the I guess, pre-crash, you know, and then I did work for a mortgage broker for about 6 months. And then I ended up joining the military, went to work for the Department of Defense, and worked full-time for since from 2008 to 2015. But during that time, I started dabbling in real estate and realized that, you know, much like probably many of your listeners, I was very frustrated with my commute, frustrated with the kind of the monotony of the day-to-day 9-to-5 job. And, you know, it was good for raising a family, got good benefits and all that stuff. And it actually ties into what we're going to talk about today, mindset. And it's very easy when you have especially a government job, frankly, to kind of just get stuck in that rut of limited thinking and just taking one day at a time and not really pushing yourself. So by 2014, I was really kind of just fed up and started looking around and started realizing that there's got to be more, you know, to life and to, you know, personal finance and growth and investing and right. Business. And I'd had small businesses before, lawn care services and, you know, gumball machines and random things. So the
entrepreneurial spirit was there.
Absolutely. So by 2015, I actually went part-time at my, you know, at the Department of Defense. And that's when we had one rental property at the time, my wife and I, but at 2015 is really when I made the switch mentally, you know, which I think we'll talk about, but that's when I really, really ratcheted things up. And it's all relative, you know, compared to Grant Cardone, I haven't done anything, but you know what I'm saying.
Got a lot to answer for.
Yeah. So, but you know, my wife and I started doing the Burr method. We started doing some rehabs and holding and refinancing, and we now have a rental portfolio in Maryland, locally to us, and then we've since expanded that into other states. But did the Burr thing for a few years there, and then realized that okay, I get it. I understood it. And then I started looking around for notes, and then for other asset classes, other strategies, and I found note investing, which I still talk to a lot of people today who are very familiar with real estate investing and have no idea that you can actually buy notes, or, you know, and I know you're very familiar with note investing, and I know your audience is probably largely familiar with notes, so we don't need to go into the basics of note investing or anything, but I really, over the last 4 years, have been heavily focused on note investing. We still have the rentals. That's still a very important part of our portfolio. But now I'm focused on creating and leading a small team and manage a note fund. And we opened the loan servicing company. And yeah, we can get into all that if you want to, but that's, I'd say 90% of my professional focus is on note investing currently.
Good stuff. So now you raise money from investors and you go and do the note investing. So you're the active investor, they're the passive investor.
That's
right?
correct. Yep. Okay. Absolutely. Chris and I manage one fund together. I am looking at starting a new fund here later this year. So we raise capital and we go out and buy notes and actively work out, the NPLs. We do buy performing notes as well. But that's absolutely right. We do take capital from passive investors and we actively manage those notes. And again, that's really my focus these days. So I love notes. They're great. There's no perfect asset class. Everything has disadvantages. But you can do note investing from anywhere. There's collateral. I mean, there are many reasons to get into notes, and that kind of sold me. It's, like I said, pros and cons to everything. But if I didn't like notes and if they weren't profitable, I wouldn't be talking about notes right now.
Right. And it kind of ties us into what we want to talk about, which is personality types, mindset. There's a bit of crossover. I sat with my wife yesterday. As I mentioned to you before, she's worked in leadership development for 11 years. And I said, hey, I'm going to talk to this guy, Jamie, about mindset. And we talked about it. And she's like, you're not talking about mindset. You're talking about personality traits, the kind of personality traits that make for a good note investor. And these are things that you can develop. But there's crossover there. I think it's semantics, really.
Hopefully she doesn't listen to this.
I would not tell her that, because they are apparently very, very different things. But I guess I would lead off and say that note investing, there's a ton of technical information out there. Anybody that's raising money from passive investors to invest in notes has some kind of educational content out there. Some people just do the educational content, like buy my course for $997 and I'll turn you into a note investor. And that's great. You need the education, you need the knowledge, because it's a technical game for sure. There's science to it, but there is also an art to it, because I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in the last 5 years since I started being really active in real estate is that, real estate isn't about real estate. Real estate's about people. The property is just the product. It's a relationships game. And the note game, if you like, in my opinion, is even more so a people game. It's a human. Every note investment you make has a human element to it, or almost every note investment you make.
I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a series of deals. You're doing a deal to buy something, you're doing a deal maybe with the borrower, you're doing a deal maybe with other lien holders, you're doing deals left, right, and center to get to where you want to get to with that particular note, right? So that kind of leads us into today's topic, and that's the art part of it, because it's part science, part art. You need all those technical tools to be able to pull out and to know what you're looking at. And personally, I learn by doing, as opposed
Me
to
too.
Which means sometimes that can be quite costly, because you can do wrong, right? You can get it wrong, but that, pain is a great teacher. But you're always dealing with humans. And
absolutely.
There are technical problems that require technical solutions, but there are also human problems that require much more complex human solutions, especially if you're buying non-performing notes and it's a residential note, it's a homeowner. Immediately, what I don't hear anybody talk about is immediately you're dealing with somebody who's probably very defensive and not in a very good state of mind, because they're looking at losing their house, right?
Absolutely.
And you're the bad guy instantly. Even if you're trying to be the good guy, they don't know that yet.
No, right.
And bad guys say they're good guys all the time. So from their point of view, you've got that bridge to overcome. So you cannot be completely detached. If you want to be a note investor, you can't. And this is a huge mistake I see people make, is getting into it. I've heard people say, I want to get into notes because it's completely emotionless. It's just paperwork. And it's the opposite. Right. It's the complete opposite, in my opinion. If you have a problem, you're dealing with a human being, and often you can resolve that problem without, getting into too deep of a technical solution, just by having a conversation with someone. I think
the art versus science thing, there's so many ways we could go with this conversation. We could cover individual deals like you're talking about with borrowers. We could cover what it takes to be a note investor, which is really the primary focus, but not only on an individual deal basis, but also to run a note business. And I think it's true across both of those, subtopics, if you will. Every note has a story, has math and a story to it. Every one. I mean, every single one, whether it's a vacant house, and we deal mostly in first lien owner occupied properties, like you said, single family residences for the most part. And, there are certain reasons we do that, and one is that we ideally want to work something out with the borrower. And like you said, that's the human element, right? So I'm not a fan of extremes, and now that quote could probably be misleading maybe, or but meaning if you approach this business as a note investor, that you're going to work with every single borrower and that it's going to be a win-win-win every time, no matter what, you're mistaken. It's like any relationship, right? Where if you don't have communication, and then some willingness to kind of work together or do something, you're not going to get anywhere. So if we don't have communication with a borrower, if I buy a non-performing loan, and if there's just simply no communication, we just can't find this person, or we just can't get them to the table, there's not much I can do, So as much as I would love to say every deal exits through the borrower, we do a loan mod, and then, we've done those, and they can be very profitable, and they really can benefit everyone involved. There is an element of, hey, I can only do so much. But you're absolutely right. I think, that's actually one of the things that, I think I underestimated initially, was how important the human element was in both in real estate and note investing, real estate investing and note investing. It's a very inefficient marketplace. So when it comes to finding deals, it's a relationship game, like you said. So
absolutely,
I think every aspect, whether it's finding deals, managing those deals, raising capital, raising capital ultimately comes down to building trust with other people. And, you already alluded to it, but vetting the person you're sending tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to is frankly more important than vetting a particular deal, because at the end of the day, you're taking a risk. You're putting trust in that person's, hands. And so from every aspect of note investing, it's absolutely a people business. And one thing I will say is you do find a lot of people who want to get into, they say they want to be a note investor. They want to get into notes, or even just, real estate more broadly. And I'm not at all saying everyone should be a note investor. They shouldn't, frankly. Many people should not be note investors. So I'm not necessarily disappointed when someone educates themselves and then moves on, but that happens quite a bit. And I think you have kind of like the Venn diagram of, you've got your engineers that are really good at crunching numbers. They love Excel, and that's important. It's very important to run different scenarios and kind of guesstimate how you think a deal is going to go. But as soon as you purchase that deal, your numbers are wrong. Right. And so then it's, oh, wait, who's on my team? Do I have an attorney? And again, people, right?
Absolutely.
Vendors, working with people. Someone has done this before. I need to learn from that person or network. And so you can't rely on the numbers entirely, ever.
Totally agree.
And so you have a lot of sort of the math and science engineer types who really are drawn to note investing, I think, because you can do it from your laptop, you can do it from anywhere, you can hide a little bit and be an introvert, and but ultimately it's a people business. Absolutely. Now that said, you don't want to go the other extreme where you're throwing caution to the wind, not crunching numbers, not actually doing your due diligence on purchasing assets. And so those engineering skills are still critical. So and there are many ways to solve these problems. You can partner up with someone who's more of an engineer type if you're more the people person. But I think ultimately successful note investors have a little bit of both, where they are able to crunch the numbers. They can understand the math behind a deal or behind running a small business. but they're also okay with being uncomfortable and pushing themselves and taking a risk. You know, you're never going to have all the answers up front, not even close. And there are many examples I could talk about on a deal to deal basis, as far as having maybe 3 out of 4 things where I'm comfortable, I've done this before, but over here, this 4th thing, I'm kind of pushing myself. Maybe it's a new state, maybe it's a bigger deal, maybe it's a particular chapter of bankruptcy I haven't dealt with before, something, but I've still got a strong attorney, I've got a team, you know, things I can fall back on that I'm, you know, so I'm constantly pushing myself, but not to an extreme where it's too risky.
Yeah. I mean, you're jumping in at the deep end, but you're not wearing lead boots while you're doing it.
Exactly.
Which is, you're absolutely right. And even in my business now, I pick and choose the investor. I raise money like you do from passive investors for our private lending program. I pick and choose from those guys, because sometimes when I'm having an initial conversation with someone, you know, they found our website and they say, yeah, great, I just want something really totally hands off. I understand the private lending thing. That's fine. I want to talk to you and figure out if I want to do business with you. And I think that's commendable. And we do that. And we just don't gel. And I'm like, this person needs to do business with someone that's not me, because we just have a different style. They're going to want different things than I can provide in terms of communication. You know, and it's just not going to work. And, you know, you turn that money down, which is the right thing to do for everybody involved. So even now on that point, it's about people, but I couldn't agree with you more. I only now buy real estate where I've got a good team. I could have expanded in the last 2 years, 3 or 4 different markets, but I don't know these people. You know, people say, okay, you know, you've got a great funding model. We can find houses and we've got rehab teams and all this kind of stuff. And I've been through enough pain with bad contractors, bad property managers, you know, bad this, that, and the other, to understand that unless I'm physically there for a good period of time and looking people in the eye, and making sure, number one, they're not stealing from me, which is a bizarrely common thing. You know, I'm not going to do it. So I buy in the markets that I know and with the people I know, and there's enough business there to do so. But also at the same time, I like to push myself a little bit and do something new every now and again. But it's interesting because we run an affordable housing program. So when I buy a house, it's not normally in a kind of rough-ish neighborhood. We renovate it. We put a long-term tenant in there. We work with that tenant for maybe 6 months. We make sure they're paying their rent on time and they're looking after the house, which isn't always the case. But if they do, we'll then sit with them and say, hey, well, why don't you look at our rent to own program? You could buy this house. And normally these are people with poor credit. There's not many other houses to buy in that neighborhood. They're of decent condition. So it's a good deal for them. And it's an opportunity. You know, home ownership changes people's lives fundamentally on so many levels. And these are people with not huge amounts of money. These are, you know, $800 to $1,200 a month rentals. So, you know, it's not low income housing, but low to middle income housing. And these people are putting down $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 into as a non-refundable deposit. And even then it works out about 50% of the time, because people just have lives, right? And stuff goes wrong. And you know, you can't overexpose yourself in your position or my position and absorb somebody else's, you know, poor decisions.
Yes. No, absolutely. It actually sounds pretty similar, even though yours is more of a rental model, rent to own. You know, we buy land contracts, CFDs that are a form of seller financing. I've frankly tried to get away from them, but from a deal flow standpoint, they're still there. And you know, you know, we don't need to go into the specifics of how those work or anything, but form of seller financing where the ownership takes place, the transfer of ownership takes place over time as the contract is paid off.
Correct. Yeah. And we use a land installment contract.
So
with ours.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's a similar type thing where I absolutely want to, and I've converted a lot of these from CFDs to a traditional note and mortgage or note and deed of trust, because I really do. I'm not after the property personally. I mean, I'm really not. I'd rather see this homeowner thrive in this situation, in this single family home with family, whatever, whatever the situation is. But, and then that gets to the people side of it for sure. But again, it doesn't always work out. So we have a similar, I guess, clientele from that standpoint. But at the end of the day, it's not, like you said, we've got investors, and I invested, and reminded me, I invested in a fund myself as a passive investor about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and didn't go real well. It wasn't the worst investment ever, but one of the comments, the one fund manager made to me was, well, we're keeping everyone in their homes, which works out best for everyone involved. And I thought, it's not working out real well for me, the investor. And it's like, it sounds good. And I want that, but at the end of the day, you can't control the other human that's on the other side of it, or things that, bad things happen to good people all the time. And we want to work with people, but it's just that way. That's why we approach every deal where we don't know which way it's going to go. If we're going to exit through the property, if we're going to exit through the borrower, we don't know, but it should be profitable no matter what happens. Should.
Right.
We've certainly lost money on deals, don't get me wrong. But we don't try to, we give options. We don't try to force the borrower's hand. I mean, whether we're focused on a loan modification, I'll give 3 options. $10,000 down. I'm just making this up, with X terms, and then maybe $5,000 down with a slightly higher interest rate, slightly higher payment, and then maybe a third option of $2,000 down. And even just within a loan mod, we'll provide options, because I don't know what's best for this person. I don't want to make it overly complicated for them, but I also don't want to force their hand. I'm not in the business of taking back the property no matter what, or doing a loan mod no matter what, or doing, cash for keys, foreclosure. It's, there's the human element that we can't control, but that's why our due diligence is critical on the front end, to allow for, any one of multiple exit strategies. So
like you said, you put your numbers together on on the basis of the information that you have, and then you get the real information, and then you're dealing with the human behind the information, and Absolutely. It could be completely different. So you've got your due diligence. In my mind, the note investing process, the due diligence process, is a filtering process. So you're filtering down to potentially the kind of note that fits your criteria. That could be just Absolutely. Down geographically, right? Or it could just be, you could just be getting into notes because you want to foreclose. So you look for notes where that looks like it's most likely going to be the workout. But I think there's a lot of information out there that and training programs that I've seen that are like, this is how you invest in notes, and this is the formula. And it's like, well, no, yes, you do need to check those boxes, and you need those pieces of information, but then you're going to actually own the note, and then you're going to find out what reality is, and then you're going to find out whether you can even deal with the human beings, or even find them and communicate with them. Right. And so your game plan might have to change. And I think my wife, the term apparently that we are supposed to be using for this, she has the master's degree in leadership development. So psychological flexibility.
Okay.
Is the term. Yeah. And it's right. You need to have that empathy, and you need to have those analytical skills, but you also need to be able to pivot, which is, why one of the reasons I don't do what you do is I did a personality test. It's called the Hogan test. Not that long ago. And it's like the 5 different types, the different things. So you're high on this and low on this, and it kind of dictates, the kind of thing that you might be good at. You might be a good engineer, or you might be good this, that, or the other. And there's a part that I don't fully understand it. My wife made me do it. And one of them is adjustment. And I had 0 adjustment, 0. And that means that if something like the guy that landed the plane in the Hudson River, he had all the adjustments in the world, because he was able to stay calm, pivot, sort the situation out. Whereas I would have jumped out of that plane window as the pilot, see ya. gone. So that's something I've worked on personally over the years, and I'm much better at that now. And actually now I find that I work best under pressure, actually. But initially getting into it, if something changed or something was not as expected, I found that very difficult to deal with. And that's not a good personality trait for a note investor. But I think, based on this conversation so far, empathy is a good one. Psychological flexibility is a good one. Analytical skills, yes, either have them yourself or borrow them from somebody else. But also having that network, right? Having a network of mentors and colleagues that have the answers to the questions that you have, because there is nothing you will come across that somebody hasn't come across already.
That is
most people,
very true. Absolutely.
I think most people are prepared to share their experiences.
And that's been very comforting for me when I've taken some risks or felt uncomfortable. I was doing jujitsu for a while, and that was one of the things. And then COVID happened, and then I injured myself. Whole different story. So I haven't gone back.
I have the same story. I separated my shoulder in my first judo competition.
Okay.
So I'm just getting back into it now.
I mean, one of the things that's very evident when you do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, any kind of martial arts like that, is you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so it doesn't mean you're entirely uncomfortable, like we talked about already, but you're pushing yourself, in some way. And so getting to your point of flexible thinking, psychological flexibility, that's the PhD term. No, but absolutely. I think, and every person needs to figure this out for themselves. It's impossible, for you and I on a podcast to boilerplate this down to this is what you need to do in this scenario. And this is why when I work with people, because I do mentor newer note investors, I want to listen. I'm trying to understand their situation, because maybe you shouldn't be a note investor, and everyone's situation different. Everyone's strengths and weaknesses are different, like you talked about with the test you took. My point being, when to quit or when to pivot. You absolutely should not be so set on your goals and your mission or the direction you're headed in that you're unaware of market condition changes or many other factors that are kind of telling you, hey, like you said, you need to pivot. However, with that said, and Chris Seveny just did a presentation at the Cash Flow Expo on this very topic, is to be a successful active note investor, it's going to take you probably 3 years to actually profit. So meaning, in your third year, you should start to see some real profit. Now, this could be year 2, it could be year 5. It's just a number. But don't believe the gurus that tell you, oh, you make $100,000 after 6 months, no problem. Then you JV and you just do that 10 more times, and then you just, oh, okay, it's just.
Oh, and by the way, I've got those notes to sell you.
Right? Absolutely, which is something. Yeah, that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Right.
But I think the point, it's a long-winded way of saying you do need to have some stick-to-itiveness. You do need to have some inflexibility at times. And if you, otherwise you'll quit in the first 6 months. This is not an extremely easy business. You want to call it mailbox money, passive income, fine. It can be, depending on, we have a whole a blog post about how passive investors can work with active investors. And that's true for real estate. And again, I know you're very familiar, your audience is familiar with joint ventures, funds, in notes, you can sell partials. That can be a very passive way to be an investor by buying partials. It can be, right? So there are many ways to skin the cat. But unless you have some stubbornness and some kind of fortitude to continue moving forward, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Does that mean
totally
do that for decades and just never make any money? No. So
I think the problem is notes, like in the part of the world that promotes notes as an investment, like the people that have courses and stuff like that, there's some great ones out there, but a lot of them promote it as notes are a great way to build passive income. Right. And it's like, I've got over 100 rental houses now, and I swear I'm less busy than if I owned 100 notes.
There's a lot going on with notes. We own 9 single family rentals. We only self-manage one of them. I don't even think about them. I do some bookkeeping here and there. I spend very little time on my rentals, and that's again, is note investing physically demanding? No, it's not.
You're not moving bricks.
But my rentals are not. I don't do anything as far as physical activity. So it's almost a cop-out answer. It depends. And I feel like I'm saying it depends more and more these days. I sound like an attorney.
Well, no, it's true, because there are no absolutes. There are no absolutes. I think someone in Star Wars said it best. Like, no, there are no absolutes.
I mean, it depends how you approach it. I really spend a lot. I mean, there's a lot. Much more of my stress comes from my note investing business, and there are a lot of details. There are a lot of moving parts. You need to be organized, or have someone who you're working with. You need systems. Like any business, you need systems and people. And so, again, it's far from passive for me. I will tell you that. Absolutely. So you need to be willing to put in some work, for sure.
Oh, and if you do want passive income, there are no shortage of people, myself and you included, who will talk to you about the product that we have. It may or may not be right for you.
Absolutely.
But whether if you and I were both pitching the same investor, they should choose the product and the person that they feel most comfortable with. Not just the product, right? Because as I said to you, there are people that I speak to who want to get involved in our private lending program. I'm like, we're just not a good fit. I'm not going to be able to give you the level of service that you're going to require.
Yeah.
In order to be comfortable.
Chris and I turned someone down who was putting in over 300 grand into our last fund. Which it's not a massive, it's not a $20 million fund, right? So that would have been nice. It just wasn't a good fit. And I've turned down people who, I'll give you a quick example. I sell partials. Oftentimes I'll sell partials to non-accredited investors if the fund that we're running is a 506c. And this person had never bought a partial, had never bought a note, was new to notes, and had his attorney kind of redline my partial agreement. And these were 2 very, very low dollar partials I was about to sell to him. And again, a partial is where you're buying part of a partial stream, maybe 3 to 5 years worth of payments. I ended up saying, look, I understand your concerns. I understand you want to be careful. I am not going to take now this rewritten, partial agreement back to my attorney, and let's all go through it together with our rounds of attorney edits. And at the end of the day, I don't need your money. It's like, I don't need, so there's
that guy needs to invest in a real estate investment trust or something like that. Cause
absolutely.
That's the level of reporting and passivity and organization and regulation that is required to have that person sleep well at night. And,
absolutely.
Being rich is great, but sleeping well at night is better. In my opinion.
I agree. I agree with you. Absolutely. And I've had people who more on more on the active side as well, who they don't take the time to figure out what their maybe investor DNA is, what their why is. So I've had, someone I was helping, he said, I just bid on these 10 to 12 notes. Can you see do my numbers look good? And then within a week, he was asking me if he should be doing short-term rentals instead. And, so I can't.
Wildly different.
I can't help you there. Maybe.
Yeah, sure. Maybe you'd be a great host. Like, who knows?
I've got your first name and your last name. I think I have a general idea of your age. So, that's when I work with people, I really do want to get to know them. And, so like you said, and I think also that's just back to the sort of the mindset piece. It's an abundance mindset. I mean, you were kind of alluding to, there's other money out there. There's other passive capital out there looking for a home. Right now, there's a lot of it. And with the craziness in the stock market and crypto and everything, there's, notes are probably not going to be, there are no tax advantages to notes. You're probably not going to get a 50% return consistently. I mean, you're definitely not. But you know what? There's collateral, and there are a lot of good reasons to get into notes as a passive or active investor. But you need to think that through. That's the point. You shouldn't just take a class and say, I'm now going to be a note investor. I don't know why. I don't know what my goals are, what my personality traits are, but I'm just going to do it. Well, think, back to the people side of things, talk to other note investors, talk to people who've been in the business for a while. What's worked, what hasn't worked, what should you be a note investor? I have a little, 5 key decisions for new note investors. And I mean, active note investors, right? They've decided, and so it gets down to which states should I invest in? Should I do first or second lien notes? Do I want to do, contracts for deed, or do I only want to buy note and mortgage, note and deed of trust? Before you start even asking any of those questions, should I be a note investor? Should I be an active note investor? Think that through. Don't go down a rabbit hole, spend 10 grand on a class, like you said, and then realize this wasn't for you. I'm not anti-education. I think, you need to learn from people who are in the business, and not necessarily from someone who hasn't done a deal in 30 years or who isn't actually profitable in the space that you're learning about. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with someone putting out a course and giving back and providing value there, and providing organized content. You just need to be careful, very careful in this space who you're learning from. And the note world is very, very niche. It's very,
small.
we very small. And
so the conversation we had when we before we hit record, we know a bunch of the same people. We've done business with a bunch of the same people.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, it's largely unregulated. And, when you get into the owner occupied space, there's some more Dodd-Frank and compliance, especially with debt servicing or debt collection. There's some licensing requirements that are there, but in general, we police our own. So meaning we talk, and if there are bad apples, which there are some in the note space, we're going to do our best to weed them out, or at least avoid them, or direct people away from them. And so, that's important to maintain the integrity of the note space and protect everyone's interests. So it's a fun space. I really enjoy it. I think it does fit my personality type well. But you have to be willing to, I think one of the key things, just to the personality trait aspect of this, is having, and I'm by no means great at this, but, this applies across probably all facets of life, honestly, but just a humble confidence. You need to have confidence to be able to take risks, to be able to take action, right?
Yeah.
But you need to have humility to be able to listen, and not only to understand someone else's position, but about yourself. You really need to do a real job of trying to understand yourself. And I'm working on it. I'm not there. I don't think I'm ever going to.
I don't think there's a destination to that journey, right? I think it's a lifelong journey, figuring out who you are, and dealing with yourself and your own issues, and doing the self-repair work, which, and even that comes into it. Like I think we're moving into a new age where there's a more conscious way of doing business. Some parts of the business world are getting way worse, but others are getting better. And I'm a firm believer in collaboration over competition. And this is one thing, as kind of an outsider, that and this does link back into a mindset, as an outsider to the American culture, when I first started doing business in America over 10 years ago, it's competition based. Everything is a fierce competition. It's beat the other guy and beat him into the ground, right? From high school and younger, all the way through sports and everything, career, everything. It's work harder, grind harder, be the best at working hard, right? And if you look back over the history of all known civilizations, it wasn't the ones that competed internally or externally that thrived. It was the ones that collaborated. Okay, so for me, it's about collaboration over competition. And when I changed my mindset there, that's when we started doing our rent to own scheme, because I was like, I ended up owning. I told you about this again before we hit record. I ended up owning a bunch of houses because a private lending deal I did. I loaned some money to a guy. It went wrong. I owned the houses, and I was like, so what do I do now? And I figured out there was a problem with this in that excuse my French, but the tenants were being treated like shit by slum landlords. So if we fix that problem, we fix our own problem, because you treat them nice and give them a good place to live. They start paying their rent on time and start looking after the house. And then you help them to buy a house, which, nobody else is doing. And the situation gets even better. So you start to collaborate, and the deals that I put together now, they have to work for me. They have to work for my private lender, but they also, people forget about the tenant. It has to work for that guy too, because he's sitting in the house. That is the security for the investment. And he's the one paying the income. So I want to be top of his priority list. And the way I do that is I fix his problems when he has problems with the house that are my responsibility to fix. If he's a couple of days late with rent, like we had 90% rent collections through COVID in low to middle income housing, which was pretty much unheard of compared
that's
to
really good.
That's fantastic. There's my phone going. That's classic. Let's get rid of that.
It's all right. You have psychological flexibility, so you can handle this.
I do now. I don't know where it's come from. It's something I've had to develop. But my wife described it yesterday as, instead of, imagine you've got a problem, you're sitting on one side of the table, there's a problem on the table, and there's the other party on the other side of the table. Well, change your mindset. Think you're both sat on the same side of the table, looking at the problem together and saying, like, this is our problem. How do we fix it?
Yeah. No, it reminds me of, because I was excited for this conversation. I told you I took some notes because it's a very important topic, mindset and personality traits. And because again, like we said, note investing is just an asset class. It's a commodity. Notes are commodities, right? I mean, not to be cold about it, but it's
paper.
It's paper. And so these traits apply whether you're a note investor or not. But I think one of the key things for me, in my opinion, is the keys to success, the keys to having an abundant life, is adding value, leading with value. And I'm certainly not the first person to come up with this, but I see so many people, nowadays, they'll post on Facebook or something and LinkedIn. I need a mentor. Here's what I need, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
What are you going to do for me?
What value are you adding? And you're talking about adding value to your tenants, solving their problems. That's a way of adding value, right? Solving problems ultimately is what we're doing here in the note space or in the lending space or in the rental space. You're solving other people's problems. Right. And that's ultimately what it is. But lead with adding value, right?
Yeah.
I have someone who I just hired on my team. His whole thing is he wants to learn notes, and he ended up having a good bit through certain personal circumstances with his family. He's got some more time than he had before, and he wants to devote a lot of that time to learning to be a mortgage note investor. Initially, I wasn't even, his resume came across my desk, and I'm not looking for someone right now. I wasn't, but the more I said, you know what, I'm going to have a call with this guy. And we talked, and point being, he led with trying to add value, and so he's now on our team and adding a good bit of value. He just started, but he's not asking me, of course I'm paying him, but he's not asking me what's in it for me. This is what I need, blah, blah, blah. That's important. You need to take care of yourself, but it gets back to empathy, and it's a people business, right? And solving problems, putting other people first. These are basic tenets that I think in today's world with the social media and the way we've kind of gone these days, it's very easy to be divisive and not put yourself in the other person's position. And I've found in my life and my business, and again, not great at it, but I've found that that's the right way to go, and that's the profitable way to go. Frankly, it comes back to you.
Yeah, I think karma's a real thing. Like I'm 42 years of age coming up, and I finally realized that karma's real. And a lot of the stuff, our parents said to us that might have seemed like silly sort of motivational quotes of the day are absolutely true. Like I have a good story, having just been out in Argentina, that sits really alongside the story that you've just told. Because I've been looking at hiring people to do the parts of to work on the parts of my business that I hate and detest, like the administrative side and updating spreadsheets and keeping bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. I do it, I hate it. But people are expensive. So I don't operate on massive margins, and I don't want to overcommit to somebody and then say, hey, we're going to let you go now. So it's been a bit of a mental
I just had
struggle.
to do that last week. It's difficult.
It is. I didn't want to do that. So we're in Argentina, and my wife's Argentinian. She left when she was 19 during the crisis. I mean, talk about somebody that went out on her own. She's 19 years old and just left the country and ended up in Spain with $100 in her pocket, and walked away with it with two tertiary degrees in a different language.
So what are you and I complaining about again?
Yeah, exactly. Other people's problems, right, are far worse. So we're out in Argentina, and the thing with Argentinians, they've been living in crisis forever, economic crisis, because there's this massive cycle of borrowing money from the IMF, corruption loses the money, borrow more money from the IRS, or steal it from people's bank accounts and pensions. That's kind of the cycle, right? But what you've got is a workforce of people that are highly educated. University education is free there. It's very highly rated. And so you've got people that speak English, that work really well. So I was in a cafe. Our Airbnb was opposite this cafe. And I go in this cafe, and with my stupid Spanglish, I try to order my coffee and my media lunas, which is like a little croissant thing. And the girl just heard my terrible accent, and she was like, oh, okay. It spoke to me in English. She said, oh, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, thank God. Somebody that speaks English. I'm not going to make a massive fool of myself. And I got talking to this girl, and she's doing 2 degrees. She's training to be a translator, but there are no opportunities in this town that she's in, this seaside town in called Mar del Plata in Argentina. So it got me thinking. I went back and I spoke. She kind of reminded me of my wife a little bit, in that she just seemed like a bit of a firecracker. She just seemed so keen to do something with her life. And this is all in like a couple of minutes of conversation. So I go back to my wife, and I'm like, I think I just met you 20 years ago. So she came over and she started talking to the girl, and she was like, you need to hire her. I'm like, well, how do I do that? I was like, well, what's COVID taught us? You can work from anywhere. So we started looking into it. And this girl, we figured out that she's working 40 hours a week contracted, plus 10 hours free. Because in Argentina, you work for free, right? If your boss says you're staying behind and cleaning, you're staying behind and cleaning. And we worked out her hourly rate was 200 pesos an hour. It's about 75 cents an hour.
Wow.
This girl is working. So we said to her, hey, look, come meet us. We're going to talk to you about maybe you doing some administrative work for David. We did that, and we spoke to her. In 2 days, she has entirely revolutionized the back end of my business, and I'm paying her $2 an hour, which is, if you think about it, that's she nearly cried when we said, we'll pay you like 700-800 pesos an hour,
3 times as much as you're making
3 times
already.
as much, which allows her to leave her job and concentrate on these 2 degrees that she's doing and training to be a translator. But all she's done since we met her is added value. She's not even filled in a timesheet yet and asked to be paid. She's like, what can I do next? What can I do next? Hey, this could be better. And those are the kind of people that I want on my team. And I've tried using virtual assistants and whatnot all over the place. And it's tough, because they're some of them aren't the brightest and sharpest tools in the box.
I mean, and that's what I just had to, I've had some failures with virtual assistants as well. It's pretty challenging.
I
haven't completely given up on that, but at the end of the day, currently we have 3 team members and I'm one of them. And the other 2 are working part-time, and they're in the US and they're well educated. And, I would love to go down that route again. I haven't given up, but it's been challenging for sure. But no, and I think as you grow in, and this gets to something else I kind of wanted to mention, was just, I find myself, I've had some leadership opportunities in my past, right? Through athletics, and then I joined the military. I was an officer in the US military. And this is not to say I was a captain, a junior officer. I served in Iraq. And when you mentioned corruption, that's the first thing that came into my mind. We dealt with a lot of that, but leadership opportunities over the years. But what I'm real, and also through my real job as a manager. But at the end of the day, I'm actually finding now most of my focus is on team building. And again, back to the people piece, right? It's ultimately all about building a team. And as much as doing due diligence on particular deals is critical, and managing those deals is critical, I'm trying to scale, I'm trying to grow, and I'm trying to help other people as well along the way. And the best way to have a greater impact is to grow my business and to be more of a leader. So I find more of my time is actually focused on listening to leadership podcasts or team building, and books like that, where again, maybe notes maybe I won't be so focused on notes in 10, 20 years. I mean, it's just I love notes. They're great, but
it's a layer of the onion, right? As we find our true purpose in life, we're constantly peeling off layers of the onion. And right now it's notes. Who knows what it's going to be next?
Absolutely.
And ultimately, sorry, Karen.
No, I love working with people who want to take ownership. Just, this isn't meant to be any kind of a sales pitch whatsoever. I like working with people who like to take ownership of their situation, who, whether that's your personal financial situation, which is incredibly important, but it's not the end all be all. Like you said, sleeping well is more important than is better than being wealthy. But taking ownership and taking responsibility and taking control of what you can control and letting go of the rest, I think is critical. So I don't like working with people who are constantly the victim,
And we have that in a, that's a very apparent thing now. It's this kind of victim or scarcity mindset, victim mentality, everyone, and it's always somebody getting offended for somebody else. It's a whole thing, right? It's an entirely different conversation, and it's a really long one as well. But
absolutely.
the diamonds for me are exactly as you say, those people that like Maho, the girl that I found, and the guy that's joined your business, the people that are taking ownership and saying, right, how can I go and add value for somebody that has the skills and the knowledge that I need to absorb? And that really, the point you're at in your business of growth, it is more now about managing the team. Like for me, the reason I've started to take people on is because there are 2 things that I do well that are, produce good outcomes in terms of new business. And that's write and produce content, which attracts investors to us. Having conversations with those investors. Everything else now has systems and processes in place, but they need people managing those systems and processes.
Sure.
So, it needs people to be updating the spreadsheets as we buy a new house. And, so I make sure that I pay the taxes on time. And we have somebody that does all of our accounting in QuickBooks. And I have somebody that's a project manager that oversees all of our renovations. I've never put up drywall in my life, but we've got 100 houses. They've all had drywall, so, you find the right person to do those jobs. And as a business grows, and I think that's getting right back to what makes a good note investor in terms of mindset. It really does focus around that psychological flexibility and understanding that it is a people game. Yes, you need the analytical skills and you need the technical knowledge, but you really do need people skills, because you'll need other people. And if you're the kind of person who's going to get really angry if you pick up the phone to a borrower, for example, if you're going to do that part of it yourself,
right,
and you're going to get upset when they start shouting at you because you haven't appreciated their life and what position they're in, that game is not for you. It's just going to cause you way too much mental stress. You're going to lose your hair real quick.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think empathy, psychological flexibility. I think you nailed it when you said you've got to be, part engineer. I can't remember what the other thing you said was, but yeah, part magician, I guess. It's like the archetypes. You've got personality archetypes, and they all play a part.
I think it's it's overly simplified way of saying it, but it's the engineer type and the creative type, right?
There you go.
That's
the
one
artist.
thing is working. Yeah, absolutely. Working with, don't let Chris listen to this, but Chris 70, I've learned a lot from. We're business partners now, but don't let it go to his head. But no, but that's one of the things, and he is far from perfect. And I don't mean to make it sound like he's the ultimate note investor or anything, but one of the things that's just so impressive about Chris is he's very analytical, extremely quick with, figuring things out he's an engineer. I mean, that's what he's in construction. He's an engineer. Yeah. But he absolutely is very creative with, I'll bring an issue to him. Have you ever run into this issue with a borrower, this situation in this state? And he's like, well, have you thought about doing this? And some of it is just because he's been at it a little bit longer, but he's extremely flexible on how to figure it out. And I joke with him that he's building the parachute on the way down, assembling it. And we're kidding, but on some level we're not, because we don't have it all figured out. And so it's certain things that have caused me great stress. So, that I think would cause a lot of people stress. He's like, oh no, that's no big deal. That's and they're, because he's figured it out before, and it's, he's very analytical, but also very creative. And so if you don't have a good mix of those two, you need to find someone who complements you well, like you said, or maybe don't be a note investor. I mean, there's, there are other ways to make money. There are other ways to add value. So, I love this whole topic. There's so many ways we could talk about this for
absolutely.
For hours.
There's a few more conversations to have in this for sure. My wife and I, actually, having sat down last night and discussed this, we're going to do something on our own, talking about. We can't think of a name for it. Maybe the art of conscious investing or something like that. So bringing in her skills of leadership development and applying it to the active and passive investor.
That's really interesting. Yeah,
because my problem is, or one of the many problems I have, is that you scroll through your social media now, and the mindset stuff is, as I say, it's like Gary Vee saying, grind harder, work harder, do whatever. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily the best way. Number one, you're going to burn out. Right. And number two, it's going to piss people off, and you're going to burn relationships. Work smarter, not harder a lot of the time. And again, it comes back to that psychological flexibility, emotional intelligence. If you're the kind of guy that's just going to get really stressed and upset because something didn't go your way, note investing definitely isn't for you, because like you said, you're going to look at a note and go, I bought this note and everything stacks up. I know I can go to this borrower with an amazing deal that's going to work so well for them. And they go, nah, not interested. And you think, well, but that was the plan. So, and then you end up maybe owning the house 6 months later, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that's why you need to have multiple tools in your tool belt as a note investor. But everything you're saying is just spot on. I'm curious. So who does your wife work with? I'm just curious.
Well, she was working in Australia. So she went from Argentina to Spain to Australia. She was working with a company called Axelum, who were a leadership development company that worked with the likes of Microsoft and so on. They were leaders in their field. And she was doing admin for them. They had an office in Argentina. She was doing admin for them. And she said to them, I want to be a consultant. I want to be one of the people that goes out and facilitates to these groups of C-level executives. And they basically laughed in her face. So she went home, cried for an hour, and then signed up to a university course, did a degree, got a job as a facilitator, traveled all across Australia for 11 years, facilitating to everyone from, she worked mainly in infrastructure companies. So they had huge government contracts, razor thin margins, and it was everyone from toilet cleaners to C-suite executives. in a room, or the law department. Imagine a room full of attorneys, and this 5 foot sort of foreign girl presenting to them. So she and the part of the job that she loved was seeing the personal change in people. People have come back to her and said, it's changed the way I deal with my kids. What I learned here changed the way I deal with my family, or it changed my entire perspective. Or do you know what? I left the job. That's the second we finished, I quit because I realized it just wasn't for me. And these are people that were stuck in their job for a long time. And so those were wins, but also she found that 9 times out of 10, the CEO was never really on board with cultural change because they lived in a business and grew in a business that got them to where they've got in the way that it was. So why the hell would they change it and make it better for everyone else? And if the top guy is not invested in change, it doesn't work.
No, you need resource allocation, you need,
absolutely. So that kind of, that got on her nerves somewhat. But now she took the plunge a couple of years ago, and she's now living her purpose. She works mostly with women who have been in toxic relationships for a long time, and she helps them. She does what's called inner child work, shadow work, which is where she helps people address the reasons that they've made these terrible decisions for themselves and their children. So she's out there while I'm doing what I'm doing. She's out there making a real difference in the world and changing people's lives. So it's a nice balance in our household, but she's still got that huge skill set that she's learned in terms of, corporate development, which is great for my business, because when I have a tricky decision to make, a good example of this, we had, I bought a duplex, and it was a horrible building, but it had tenants in both sides. So one of the invariably when you buy a house in that kind of bracket, price bracket, the tenant either doesn't pay the new landlord rent or leaves, which is what I was hoping, because I hate inheriting tenants. It never works out. So one side left, so we went in and we cleared that out. The other side is a veteran, and he's got terminal cancer. I mean, this guy's life could not be worse. And he hadn't paid rent to the previous landlord for like 6 months because the county, the particular county is in, was very, very difficult to get rent support, even for vets. Right. So nobody was supporting him. So my property manager said, look, we're gonna have to evict this guy. So and this was an ethical decision now, because I've got a lender against that property. I've got half the rental income I expected, but it's only realistically costing me a couple of $100 a month if he's not paying his rent in profit. So it's not like big numbers. So this was sort of 3 or 4 months, the run up to Christmas. And my property manager said, we're starting to be able to see the eviction moratorium's lifting. Do you want us to set a court date? And I was like, okay. I sat down with my wife and I was like, what decision do we make here? And she's like, well, imagine it was your dad. Right. So, great. My dad had just passed away at the time, so she knew what triggers to press. So I said to the property manager, just go back to the guy and tell him the one thing he doesn't have to worry about is being evicted. We're not going to evict him, no matter what. And we'll try and work with him to come up with a solution. But just don't worry about that. Worry about all the other crap you've got going on in your life.
Right.
And his rent's like $450 a month. It's not a lot of money. So we work with him through all of these different schemes. The property manager's been great, like putting his applications in, working with him to try and get all these, the funding for his rent. And they've all said, no. And last week we got a check in the mail for $7,000 from Lawrence County for all of his back rent. So that's an example of how her input into my business has kind of led to a good karma event, because we did the right thing. It cost us a few $100, but now I'm quids in, and this guy has, it's worked out for him pretty well.
And the other thing is, if you were too busy grinding and running the numbers and going on to your next deal, you wouldn't have taken the time. You're giving your wife credit, which is she should get credit, but you also stopped to listen and think about it and ask her. So you weren't. So there's that element too. If you're too in the weeds and too busy, and you're not going to even take the time to. I just read a book on what's it called, the way less stupid, I think.
Right.
and trying to see if it's here. But it's about scheduling structured thinking time. I know we're running short on time, but it's about scheduling structured thinking time, because especially nowadays with working from home, and it's very easy to work even more. I find it very easy to.
It's hard to turn off.
Absolutely. So I haven't instituted this yet, but just blocking out structured thinking time. I don't mean 2 minutes to meditate in the morning and I'm not knocking meditation. I'm just, actually structured thinking time where it's 20 to 30 minutes on a particular topic and you're taking notes. And so that's something I need to do. But the fact that you were willing to stop and ask her and listen. And
what's the human decision was I think her words were, what's the human decision, not the business decision. What's the human decision? So I spoke to the private lender. I'm like, look, I'm still going to service your interest. Obviously, I'll do that if the house was vacant. But just to let you know, this is going on. So we're probably not going to get in there to renovate it. So, you've loaned us this much money, which was based on the ARV. That's not going to happen, right? Are you good with this? She's great. She's done loads of business with her. So and now I'm way better off as a result.
And the other thing to mention quickly is that sometimes it doesn't mean leaving the person in that situation and just burying your head in the sand. I had a situation ended up being a really good win for us in Jacksonville, Florida. And I've talked about this previously, so people can check it out if they want to. But it's a really good case study for numerous reasons. We ended up doing a long distance rehab. Still haven't been to Jacksonville myself, so I'm kind of proud of it.
Is this the one in your? I've been getting your ebook.
It's in the book, yes.
Brilliant ebook. People should sign up for that.
Thank you. There's too much content for a free ebook, frankly. But the point I'm getting to is the occupants in that situation at that time. They were not in. It was, bed bugs, disgusting filth, and I'm sure you run into issues like this. And long story short, they ended up, we gave them time, but a couple of months, but they're in a better situation now, and they were not in a healthy environment. It ended up being a win-win-win. Probably 4 or 5 wins, depending on how many, people you want to, contractors and different people who worked on this, who were exposed to this deal. My attorney, different, you name anyone.
They always win. They always win.
They always win. Yes, they don't tend to lose.
No,
but point being, I don't think you should take the stance that, leaving people in their home or in this situation is always the best way to go. No. Sometimes they need a nudge, or they can't afford it. It's like, it's at some point it's not working. We need to find you a better solution. So
I totally agree.
Flexible thinking.
Flexible thinking. Absolutely. And with my wife's work that I've just described, what she tends to find is that the people that make the changes in their lives are because they've had something so bad happen to them that they have to look at themselves and say, it's me. What do I have to work on me to stop getting into these relationships or these situations? And until that consequence slaps you around the face, you can just carry on. People living in filth, I get it all the time. People living in filth are going to continue to live in filth because they just get used to it.
Yeah.
And until they get booted out, they're like, right, now I've got to do something about it. So, just leaving people alone isn't necessarily always, and we're not the arbiters of morals and ethics and whatnot. No. But in note investing and in real estate investing, because it is such a human game, you invariably come across situations where your decision will impact the life significantly of other people. So you have to have, circling back to those personality traits that we talk about, you have to have empathy.
No, absolutely.
You also have to have self-discipline as well. And there's an intelligence that you have to learn by doing, I think, rather than just out of a book, that to know when the time is to pivot from your plan, when the time is to stick to your plan. And it's like being disciplined to be flexible, if that makes sense. really difficult to explain, but being straightforward, military style, just keep marching and marching and marching and marching until you get there. That's great, but if you come across a mountain, maybe march around it, like occasionally.
No, that's all very good points.
Yes.
And as a note investor, as I think probably, I know we're short on time here, but there are many situations where I'm thinking, just what should I do here? I mean, you take advice from different experts and your vendors and attorneys and things, your servicer, but at the end of the day, they're looking at me to make that decision. So my attorney will often say, what do you want to do here? It's on me. So if you don't have that makeup, that DNA to deal with these situations, the two examples we've talked about here, something, about potentially kicking someone out of their home or not, or maybe you shouldn't be dealing in certainly non-performing notes and owner occupied. So just the point is, I view my role as essentially, I mean, I'm a leader, but kind of an orchestrator, conductor of the orchestra, if you will.
Yeah, right.
And I have many experts that I listen to, right, in different fields, but it's me I'm making the decisions. So, and it gets back to the ownership piece of things. So
absolutely,
I don't shy away from that.
It reminds me, and let's have this as the final anecdote, because I'm going to get this really wrong, because I kind of only half remember it, but there's a time when Henry Ford was sued, I think by the government, maybe, because he was talking about how the war that was going on at the time, because there's always one, right? There was a terrible decision to make, and it was awful. And obviously it's Henry Ford, so he's getting press time and whatever. So they sue him, and their lawyer had a strategy of trying to make him look stupid, right? So they got him on the stand and they say, who was the 14th king of France or whatever, those kind of really technical questions. Yeah. And he stopped the guy and he said, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but in my office, I've got a row of buttons in front of me, and I can press any one of them and have the world's leading expert on that topic in my office in 5 minutes. And that's a true leader. It's knowing that you don't have the answers, but you're having the humility to ask the right person. And that was a great example. And I've mangled that.
I've heard that. I've read about that as well. I don't have any corrections or anything to add. That was very good.
Someone will.
That's okay. That's okay.
Someone will definitely offer me a correction or two on that.
Yeah, that's okay. I saw something from Adam Grant the other day. It was really good. About a week ago. I don't know if you follow him at all, but he posted something. It was a really good diagram of it gets to the humble confidence that we've talked about. And you absolutely shouldn't be that person who says, I don't care what people think, I'm going to be me, and this is my interpretation. But you need to listen to people. You need to care what people think. Actually, you actually do. You shouldn't be dismissive and say, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, I don't care what you think. But there's really only a small subset of people that you should genuinely need to be careful whose advice you're taking and who you're really caring about, what their thoughts are about you. It's a very small subset of people you should really care about as far as how they view you.
Be prepared to be wrong. Be teachable.
Absolutely, be teachable, and be able to listen. But it doesn't mean that everyone's person online, someone who comments on your podcast, that they're going to correct the story that you just told. Oh, well. Okay.
Right.
Who cares?
So and my wife had that. She's helping a lot of people, and people are having these epiphanies, but Argentina, pound for pound, has more psychologists than anywhere else in the world. Right. I stayed in an Airbnb in Argentina, and the host left us a bottle of wine and a business card for a psychologist. So honestly, it's the craziest thing. And they're quite mad with us. Some are like, she works with a lot of psychologists, but a lot of them are quite mad with her, because she's making changes for people that I've been seeing them for 10 years and making no progress. So they're angry because, their methodology hasn't worked for people. Right. But those people are their paychecks. So there's always going to be somebody out there that critiques you. Somebody posted on her social media pages how amazing she left a 40-year abusive marriage because of the work she did with Joe, and freed up her children from this abusive guy, and it was new beginning. The woman was like 60 years old, and finally wow. made the leap. And so psychologist commented, what you're doing is illegal and you shouldn't do it. It's like, really? Like, okay, well, tell the woman to go back home then. Like,
well, I feel like we could go on, but I just I'm reading a book. I never thought I would say this, but I'm reading a book by Brene Brown on leadership, Dare to Lead.
Yeah, have you read it? Great book.
Yeah. And so it was from my wife, and it's right here, but she talks about the Theodore Roosevelt quote of the
being
man
in the arena.
Yeah, exactly. Man in the arena. And so, if you're not in the arena, if someone's criticizing you and they're not actually doing anything,
it's just noise.
I don't have time for that.
Yeah. Someone's sitting in the pulpit screaming and shouting at me. It's like in a college football game, right? It's the 300-pound guy at the back screaming and shouting how terrible the elite athletes on the field are.
Oh yeah. Well, the Super Bowl
was opinion.
That's
great.
The Super Bowl was last night, and I've seen things about how Joe Burrow should have handled the final play. That's great from you on Twitter, watching from your couch. That's really
exactly
really good advice.
It's crazy. Listen, let's wrap it up and say,
absolutely,
going right back to the start, the mind, there's so much to talk about, and it's really, again, I think you encompassed it the best when you said it depends. Like, what are the best personality traits? You can't be the perfect, have all of the perfect. It's unlikely that you'll have all of the perfect character traits that make you a great note investor. So surround yourself with good people, be psychologically and emotionally flexible, understand that you're dealing with people with real world problems, be able to have conversations and communicate with people. And also the basics, like do what you say you're going to do, especially if you're raising money from investors. Like if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. That builds trust and credibility.
You're automatically in the top 50% right there if you can actually do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly so. Yeah. So, and again, let's steal that from my wife, that psychological flexibility. Understand that you can read all of the articles and blog posts and watch all of the videos and do all of the courses, the $997 courses that you want. When you actually buy a note, it's going to be way different to what you thought. And just know that hopefully you've done enough digging and knowledge farming to know that, okay, I know roughly what I'm looking at. I know roughly what my options are. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, is get a mentor, somebody that's done it. Don't try and guess, but be prepared to make mistakes, and don't expect to become a millionaire overnight, because it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. Got to take the long view. Another thing that comes to mind very quickly is confidence comes from competence, and competence comes from reps. And again, you need to be in the arena doing, but also have a mentor, have some people you look up to that you're learning from, and you've never arrived. So
that's actually I'm reading, I think, the 48 Laws by Robert Greene. So it's got something different by every day, and that was today's. That was, be a child, surround yourself with people who are super knowledgeable in your space, and be like a child, absorb it, and then do it, because the human being we acquire knowledge through books, but we learn and we change by action, by doing, by repetitions. Right? You don't watch YouTube, a couple of soccer YouTube videos and become the next Pele, or
I thought this podcast episode was going to create an army of note geniuses. Is that not?
No, there was a YouTube video which was, I think, called Note Investing Basics. Which by some other guy. They need to watch that, and then there's no need to listen to this. In fact, we should just throw it straight in the bin, because you'll have all the technical knowledge you need. Brilliant, Jamie. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I have as well.
I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. We're definitely going to have more if you're up for it.
Sounds
because
great.
This part of it, the technical stuff, is because there's so much technical stuff with note investing. There's a plethora of stuff out there, and there always will be, and that's great. But they're talking about the mindset side of it specifically, I think, is a little gap that hasn't yet been filled properly. So we will do this again. So thanks for your time. And as I said at the start, we'll work on getting a piece of contact information slide up, and I'll have my video guy put that on this. So if people want to reach out to you, hopefully you won't get thousands of people saying, teach me, teach me, oh master. But also about the offerings that you have or will have in the future as well. And maybe a link to your podcast, the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast, which is fantastic with you and Chris. So people should definitely give that a listen as well. So yeah, thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We need to have you on our show for sure. And if you're labradorlending.com is a good place to check out what we have going on. We've got stuff for active and passive note investors as well. So labradorlending.com is my website. If
I will make sure that comes up on the screen somehow by some magic. Again, I've hired the right people, right? I've got a guy that does videos.
Absolutely.
It's a skill I don't want to learn. So that will be flashing up on the screen right now, hopefully.
Perfect. We just redid the site, so it's hopefully as clear as can be. So if anyone wants to reach out,
people do go there, sign up for the newsletter, because you get that ebook in kind of chapters, which I found really 5 useful.
Parts. Yeah,
5-part ebook on note investing. It's got some case studies in there, and case study. All the talk's one thing, but an actual case study, I think, is probably one of the most useful things that you can read if reading is your thing.
Absolutely,
because it's real life, right?
No, so I just want to thank you for having me on, David. It's been really good. I think it's a critical topic, and we can't cover it all in one episode.
Oh gosh, no.
Mindset and personality; these things apply to all of life, really. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a very important topic, and I it's one I really enjoy. Growth and mindset and personal responsibility and all those things. So I really want to thank you for having me on. It's been great. And like I said, we'll have to, if you have the time and we can make it work, we'd love to have you on our show as well.
I will make the time. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.